Thanks for joining. Thanks for joining me, everybody. Charles Moscowitz here. So I'm finishing my new manuscript, my new book, the working title of which is "The Revolutionary Mind and the Counter-Revolutionary." And I go through a litany of the revolutionary movement, going all the way back, I would contend, to the original revolutionary, which was Cain and Abel, which really was Adam and Eve. When, of course, Eve partook of the forbidden fruit, she launched the revolution. This is the metaphor that was used by Whittaker Chambers in his famous autobiography, Witness, where he points out that communism is the world's second oldest religion, and that when Eve partook of the forbidden fruit, she basically not only defied God and defied God's creation and nature, but she fell for the blandishments of the serpent, who is represented by Satan in most literary accounts. And his call that she could be like God. She could know everything. She could know good and evil. She could know all the secrets and the mysteries of the universe, and essentially, as such, overthrow God in heaven and be God's equal. And of course, by partaking in the fruit and then by including Adam, they entered into a conspiracy. A conspiracy is when two or more people decide to do something that is subversive or illegal or revolutionary. And often an element of conspiracy is denial and trying to hide it, which is exactly what Adam and Eve tried to do after God asked them, did they partake of the forbidden fruit, and they denied it. So you had the first attempt by man to overthrow nature. And of course, every generation has dealt with the same phenomena. I go through a whole litany of who were revolutionaries and who were what I call counter-revolutionaries, which is to say those leaders and those movements that sought to advance and restore order and genuine human progress. What my good friend E. Michael Jones calls logos, accurately, by the way. And I think his new book is going to be coming out by sometime before the end of the year. So you have every generation struggling between those who seek to subvert man, those who seek to subvert God and nature, and those who seek to advance it and preserve it because it's genuinely progressive. And I think that I bring this up today because this is what's going on, obviously, in our own time, always has been. But at this time, it's particularly acute and particularly stark, in that I would argue the election of President Donald J. Trump represents a counter-revolutionary development. The American Revolution was a counter-revolution. Washington and the Founding Fathers sought to reestablish rights that had been usurped by this foreign power, this king and his parliament. And those rights included the right to representation, the right to create their own currency, the right to determine their own borders, and all of the other issues that the American revolutionaries or counter-revolutionaries were dealing with at that time. I get into more details in my book, as I mentioned. And I would argue that President Trump is the counter-revolutionary of our time. In a sense, he is carrying on the counter-revolution, which we've lost ground on over the past many decades. I would argue since 1912 and then World War I, we've had significant losses in terms of the development of genuine human progress. And I would suggest that the most stark example right now, as we move toward the election, is the regressive and disgusting and revolutionary agenda of the left in this country and their establishment and their media fake news lackeys who either consciously and wittingly or otherwise are promoting their agenda. And it's on display in full right now at the G8 summit in Biarritz, France. You have President Trump standing with Boris Johnson, the newly elected Prime Minister of Britain, and basically saying in blunt terms that the United States is going to help Britain in the Brexit, which is due to come up in October, which is only a month or two away. And that any penalties and fines and attacks that Britain might suffer from the globalists, who are the revolutionaries, as a result of Britain simply exerting its sovereignty and its independence as a strong independent nation, that will be met by the United States helping Britain with trade and with favorable agreements that could ease the dislocations that are probably inevitable, but yet necessary in this move toward greater sovereignty for that nation. This is a counter-revolutionary development. England is reasserting its natural rights as a sovereign nation, where the British people have a say in the nature of their government and thus in their own lives and futures. President Trump also, at the summit, signed a trade agreement with Japan, another nation that is asserting its sovereignty, and he's doing so by countermanding the Chinese operation of trying to cheat by stealing American intellectual property and unfairly engaging in trade relations by which they can dump cheap products on the American market, which hurts American labor and American industry. President Trump is standing up for American labor and industry. He's standing up for economic development in his own sovereign nation, the United States, and stopping this illegal and usurpation of America's rights. That's what sovereign nations do. They regulate trade policy and tariff policy in a way that benefits the nation. Now, the United States may experience some dislocations as a result of this, but it's worth it. We have to do this. We have to save our ability to control our own internal domestic manufacturing and business atmosphere and our own labor, even if it costs a little bit and if there's a little bit of pain going into it. So that is another example of a counter-revolutionary, of a counter-revolution, a nation standing up for its own sovereign natural rights. And it's inspiring other leaders to fall in line and do the same for their nations. These are counter-revolutionary movements. And we are confronted, and President Trump laid it out so brilliantly, as he often does in his great tweets, that the fake news media and the leftist establishment is trying to literally create a recession. And in the process, they are trying to hurt American workers, American economy. They don't care. They just want to win. So we're going to see a lot of ugliness come down the pike. I got to go, but ugliness come down the pike in the coming days, weeks, months, and this year leading up to the election. We're going to see despicable charges that President Trump and the rest of us by proxy have something against this group or that group. Don't believe those lies. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody, and have a great afternoon.